right, good morning, everyone. It is just a delight to be back with you. I've now been here several times in collaboration with the experiential engagement, and I'm going to get the acronym wrong, the Center, and the Honors College, and all of you in various capacities of collaboration with the city and also with this kind of deep vein of scholarship and activism that I'm excited to share with you today. I was invited, I'd say maybe specifically, to discuss this book and a chapter that I had the opportunity to co-write with my co-author, Rebecca Retzloff, who actually was a co-editor of the entire volume. And so this will be the starting point of what I want to share with you this morning. But I'm going to try to make a bridge while we talk together between some very rigorous scholarship and history, and then also my current work with the city of Montgomery and how that perspective of truth-telling and focus on reconciliation plays out in urban design and planning today in real time. And so the book is called, I'm going to do a little bit of this looking around myself since I can't see the slides, Justice and the Interstates, the Racist Truth About Urban Highways, a very forthright title, published just recently in 2023. And then the chapter that I had the chance to work on with Becky is called The Interstates, Racism and the Need for Truth and Reconciliation, the Case of Highway Routing in Montgomery, Alabama. So this hits really close to home, but the implications of the title are that this is a national initiative, and by calling it directly racist, which is quite a strong statement, we're trying to be quite clear. There's really no ambiguity, and it's written by a whole bunch of scholars across the country that look at case studies from cities across the country in reference to the intentional work of the Department of Transportation and the United States federal government. And the scholarship is extremely rigorous, such that there really are no holes and questions. It's just really stating what did happen. So this is the truth-telling part about the work. And so in this talk, just to give you kind of a little pathway through the talk, what I'm going to do is walk you through the chapter that I had a chance to work on with Becky, and focusing. She is, I'll just mention about Rebecca Retzloff. She teaches at Auburn University in the Graduate Department of Community Planning. She's an incredible historian and scholar on environmental, legal, and historic approaches to understanding the practice of planning. What is planning? Planning is like all these fields whereby we work together to construct the built environment based on studies and plans. And so she leads in our work together the profound historical research, and I bring a perspective as an urban designer on what does this mean today to us to practice. What does it mean to be a planner today, a designer of the built environment, to work for the government today, knowing the things that we do know about the history? So we start the chapter by talking about just where did this start? Well, we've been planning roads in this country, since the beginning of the nation. This is how we travel around the world. So we move. So I'm giving you on your right-hand side just a little timeline of to keep kind of contextualize this. The automobile was really only invented in 1866. In 1886, the city of Montgomery actually invented the first electric streetcar. So the history of transportation is evolving as the federal government is developing its policies. And so the very first interstate is recorded in the Arroyo Seco interstate in Los Angeles. And in the chapter, we mentioned that to let you know that from the get-go, these large infrastructural projects were designed to achieve multiple goals. They were really designed to achieve goals of connectivity and to help us move around the land, the escape through cars, but they also took advantage of certain perspectives and often cut through what were deemed to be distressed neighborhoods or to be neighborhoods, of vulnerable neighborhoods in various ways. And so this first one is an example of a neighborhood that cut off the Mexican-American communities of Los Angeles. Okay, so just a starting point here. In 1956 is when the government passed the Highway Act, and this is when we have an official active governmental policy that is used for political purposes, both on the one hand to spur economic development, because highways connect things, and they propel the movement of goods and services, but they were used then also intentionally to disrupt, displace neighborhoods that were at that time segregated or undesirable, and often had the greatest impact on minority and low-income neighborhoods, and then served further to disconnect people. So while they're, on the one hand, vehicles can move around and you can get from here to there, the giant imposition of this infrastructure upon these vulnerable neighborhoods ultimately served to really disconnect those people and often displace them for a really long and difficult time period. Okay, so I don't mean to bore us with the basic intro, but I want to get to Montgomery and what's so pointed in this chapter and in this work. Again, it's called out explicitly that this was a racist policy. Well, how do we know that, and how can we say that, and why should we say that? And what happens when you really start to dig into the archives, into the published documents, into the things that were spoken, and when you look deeply into who was in charge and what did they say and how did they act, it turns out it's unequivocal. And if you look up Mr. Sam Engelhardt, what you learn about this person is he was an Alabama senator. He did serve as the director of the highway department, and he happened to also be the head of the White Citizens Council and had an unequivocal white supremacist standpoint. So this is just true facts about the person. You can hear his own words when he describes how he was deploying the extension of the highway system in our state. So, and I think in this, I hope we're all following along with this story, and if you'll read the chapter, what you find out is it's actually a very strategic use of the highway system in our city, and it's quite glaring in Alabama because we did have the White Citizens Council who were such outspoken white supremacists. And so what happens is, I mentioned 1956 is sort of a turning point in the federal government to use the highway system as a way to build roads and extend an interstate system. Again, there's the positive side. We are looking at economic development. We've learned from World War II and by studying the German Autobahn that this is an incredibly powerful way to not just move people and cars, but if needed, to move, in fact, entire military tank systems. So we have developed an idea about how important the federal highways are. So here we are, we've got Sam Engelhardt in our state in charge of these decisions. And this gentleman is from the area of Shorter, Alabama. He was a plantation owner. His family had enslaved people on their property, and he was at that time a person who really believed in the legitimacy of that system. Okay, so that's Mr. Engelhardt, and he in fact kind of cuts his political teeth by trying to gerrymander the city of Tuskegee. And his gerrymandering is so obviously in, out, in, out, in, out, in, that the shape that he proposes was described as a 27-headed sea dragon. Meaning, like, imagine, it's not the city of Tuskegee, it's this is in, this is out, this is in, this is out, this is his political contribution is this kind of heavy-handed white supremacist approach to planning. And it's not, I don't say this because I'm interpreting, I say it because my partner is a very rigorous legal scholar who read back and forth written documents whereby this gentleman says these things outright. So we know them to be true. So what happens in Montgomery is we have, as you know, and many of you have been now to the Rosa Parks Museum, you've been really looking at this, we have the bus boycott of 1955. And just at the same time as the citizens are really trying to stand up for their rights to equal access to transportation and to vote, and they're fighting in a very peaceful way through the protests and marches and things, what happens is there's an approved route for the extension of I-65 and 85, and you guys drive this all the time, you know what I mean, where it goes now. And that route was proposed to basically cut through between ASU and its accompanying neighborhood, Centennial Hill, and 65 is designed to run through what is called West Montgomery, right? And so the citizens actually said, no, wait, no, please don't do this. This is our neighborhood, this is Holt Street. Please don't do this. This is our university, and our children walk between the schools, and our faculty walk between the campus. This is intact. This is whole. This is meaningful. And there were alternate proposals made. Let's reroute it further west, where it will be actually more affordable. There are thousands of signatures put forward, and this is all very well documented. But what happens is, and this is what the chapter points out, and this is the point of this beginning part of the talk, is that Mr. Sam Engelhardt, the Director of Transportation, who is a spitting mad white supremacist, says, absolutely not. We're going to, in fact, take out Ralph Abernathy's house. We're, in fact, going to intentionally cut through these places. So it's, so it's not abstract. It becomes very intentional destruction of the neighborhoods that gave rise to the civil rights movement in Montgomery. Okay, and so this is what this is saying is what happens is you have the march, and then you have this approval of the route. Then you actually have faculty and students, brave faculty and students like yourself at ASU, who said, we're going to protest the segregation at the lunch counters. And right after, and in retribution to that protest, you see that the route is shifted to, in fact, target faculty homes. So this is not a question, was it intentional? It's very specifically described as intentional. We're going to get Joanne Robinson. We are going to get Ralph Abernathy. We're going to take out the leaders of the movement, and we're going to destroy the Black business district of West Montgomery. And so, yeah, I'm getting shivers, honestly, because I know this and I've written about it, but it's real and it's true. And so there are ensuing efforts, and the Freedom Riders come through in 61, and this is obviously a terribly condensed history, but Abernathy's church is bombed, and then you get the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, right, which comes through West Montgomery because it's coming from Selma along the Mobile Highway. It turns through this neighborhood. It comes right down Oak Street, you know, and up towards the Capitol. Months later, that freeway construction begins, not where the community had said, please don't do this, put it here. And of course, there's big forces with highways, so I'm not trying to say, you know, but it becomes increasingly strategic that it's designed, not just to connect, you know, from Atlanta to Montgomery, but it's the routing is intentional. And so this is what we've started to talk about as planned violence. And this is the neighborhood of West Montgomery prior to the freeway, and that's about the size of the swath that it took out. 13 streets disconnected, hundreds of small businesses lost, families displaced, no off-ramp, so that's a kind of a sign. Who is this for? Yes, we have to do big construction. Yes, we have to displace an eminent domain, but who is it for? And there's no new access provided to the neighborhood. Rather, it serves to disconnect the neighborhood. Income loss of 50 to 70%, and these are statistics from the research. Okay, so that was the very difficult history I wanted to use as a premise to talk about, well, what do we do now? And there's obviously a lot of interim between then and now, but I'm here because I work for the city of Montgomery. I serve as the urban design planner, and what that means is I work with neighborhoods, with citizens, and with the city itself to improve quality of life in the city, and especially in the public realm, the streets, the public spaces. And I love this work, and I think that it's exciting work. And so really I'm here to move on to the spirit of what do we do when we look at the truth of this history, and what does it mean, and what do we do going forward as designers, as planners, as all of you involved in this civil rights and then civic virtues. What are these virtues? What can we do with them as professionals in this discipline? So I'll just tell you, I talk about urban design justice, and what that means, I think, is that first and foremost, we have to acknowledge the truth of the past. So I'm a planner. I feel responsible for the past of the Department of Transportation. I feel responsible for the role of the government since I work for the city. And so I'd say step one is acknowledge the history and the legacy of systemic racism and injustice as integral to the urban form. When you walk around the city today, what you're seeing is a legacy of these decisions that were made. And they're in the past, and life has gone on, and there's a lot of great resilience, and there's a lot of adaptation, but that did happen, and it did happen to people, and to people that are now people we live with or we know, or our families. So then, from this position, urban designers work to reverse cycles of disinvestment, build capacity, connect the city, and promote this thing that I've learned a term that I hope I can share with you today, the aesthetics of equity. What does that mean? What does equity look like? And what is its beauty? And what is its joy? And so I've done the difficult work, and that was hard. And now we're going to move a little bit onto what is the practice of all of this look like, at least from these disciplines. But I'm just going to show you a couple more slides that help you see how you can see this history, in case you're wondering, and then how you can read it today in your city, because it had a impact on, and it continues to have an impact. So this is actually a really cool website. These are colleagues at University of Richmond, Virginia, and they have mapped most of the United States cities so that you can see the redlining, which is the maps that were used mostly to guide investment or bank lending or things like this. And when a neighborhood is redlined, it was described as having, at the time, I think the language really is about demographic composition. If it's a majority black neighborhood at the time in a segregated city, these were described so that people would either lend money to new investment or not. And so you look at where this was. This is before the freeway, and it shows a kind of urban black city of Montgomery, and it guided a lot of future investment. But what I'm gonna focus just a little bit on more of an example with you all. So I think it's a place many of you will know, and I'm gonna look at especially the west part of Montgomery that was cut off by the 65 route, and really the cloverleaf of those two intersections landed right there on the Selma to Montgomery March route, on the Mobile Highway connection into the inner city, basically cutting off and destroying the Holt Street West Side Black Business District. But this is what that neighborhood looked like at the time, and you can actually see little streetcar routes. You can see, so you're seeing Mobile Street, and if you kind of keep that diagonal in your kind of orientation, you'll be able to track that through some of these slides. I love this drawing because it's so sweet, and you can really see the houses and the scale and density of the neighborhood. And so this is kind of a different view of that, and it really dates back to 1887, so it's kind of just keeping that diagonal in mind and realizing that the platting of the city showed this kind of diversity and density. And this image is at the time of the march, so you're actually seeing the march come in along Grady Street and turn up Mobile, and that is the McClendon Furniture Factory that was in the neighborhood and part of the life of the neighborhood. And sometimes this neighborhood is referred to as the historic Peacock Track, and I really hope I have the opportunity to work with you along the Voting Rights March and on this track. But it was a diverse and dense neighborhood. So there's Mobile. You can see that diagonal now, and you see how it's coming in from Selma. And now you can see where that cloverleaf landed, and then you can see ASU. That neighborhood to the north of it is called Centennial Hill. So that's the impact. There we have it, and that's what the map looks like today. And again, the city has healed itself and made bridges across this divide, but it has had quite a lingering impact. And this is an article that has been written, another article on the topic, How Montgomery Highway Sought to Disrupt the Heart of the Civil Rights Movement. So there's other scholars writing about this, and if you're interested, you can follow along. Okay, so back to what do we do, and what is the city doing, and what are all these incredible efforts that are part of the current life of the capital of Alabama about? And one of our great leaders we can look to, and a lot of you have now had the chance to visit the Equal Justice Initiative's National Memorial to Peace and Justice. And Brian Stevenson, amongst other really important scholars and leaders on this topic, reminds us, healing must begin with telling the truth about our history of injustice. We tell the truth, and not to blame, but we tell the truth to look at it and to understand it and to move forward. And so part of EJI's effort has been to create this new national memorial to peace and justice, and to honor and recognize those that were lynched in the time period of lynchings in the state of Alabama, to bring attention and a process of healing to this history. And of course, as you know, the Legacy Museum is now there. And one thing that Brian talks about is this importance of narrative spaces. What are narrative spaces? They're spaces where you can learn, you can hear stories, you can deepen your understanding through these interpretive arts. And I know that EJI is committed to using a broad range of techniques. And if you've been through those museums, to me they're just astounding how beautiful, really, and how innovative they have been in tapping into the ways that people learn and feel things. So they're connecting to us through empathy, through brilliance. You know, there's just so many beautiful ways that they use the arts to teach and to communicate. So it's difficult material. It is hard to look at the truth. It touches people in very, very profound ways. And so we go through these things together to learn and come out the other side better. Another way of sort of starting to move towards reconciliation is renaming things. And one of the ones that happened right here at that Cloverleaf that's really, to me, very exciting, is that Main Boulevard running east-west has been West Jefferson Davis Boulevard for many years. In fact, it turns out that the great civil rights attorney, Fred Gray, grew up on that street. And he has gone on to become one of the most important civil rights attorneys in our nation, defending Rosa Parks, fighting the United States government in the Tuskegee syphilis study, many, many other really important cases. And just 2 years ago or so, the street was renamed in his honor, and he spoke at that dedication. So this is kind of like what I'm going to transition a little bit to, is what can we do in this truth-telling, and then the reconciliation work, and also the work of reconnecting and rebuilding our city in new ways. Okay, so this I'm very excited to share with you. If you do not know, I feel privileged to introduce Dr. Mindy Fullilove. She is a scholar. She's a professor of urban policy and public health. She came to her work through epidemiology and public health studies, but the more she spent time in communities with people that were struggling with various health disparities, the more she realized these were not one-off cases. These were systemic issues that really related to the impact of the built environment. So she was in New York, and she was seeing certain things. And she has gone on to develop this beautiful body of scholarship. So I'm excited to share this with you because she wrote one book, her first one, called Root Shock: How Tearing Up City Neighborhoods Hurts America, What We Can Do About It. And it really talks about the impact of freeways and also other urban renewal programs on our cities. But then she went on and she wrote Urban Alchemy: Restoring Joy in America's Sorted Out Cities. And so she's not there only to describe the problem or to talk about it in the past, but she gives us some really good tools for then going on to do the needed work. So, okay, she shares some vocabulary. I only have two for you. Root shock is really important because how do we talk about this stuff, and what is its impact, and how do we understand if you have not lived through it? And many people have lived this experience. But what happens when you displace a community with something like a freeway is what she uses the root shock. Think of a plant being pulled up by its roots. And what she says is there's a emotional ecosystem that is disturbed. You're not just physically moved, you're moved from a community that made a lot of sense. And I work with my boss, Desmond Wilson, who he's the director of community development for the city of Montgomery, and some of you have met him. He grew up right there on Grady Street. So there were markers put in his yard one day that said, we're eminent domain, we're building a freeway, you're gonna be moving, figure this out. And just to say, this experience is not just about movement, it's about a disruption of an emotional ecosystem. What happens to that neighborhood that you once knew? The landmarks are actually gone. The buildings are gone. The businesses, the orientation that you had within that neighborhood is disrupted and disturbed. And kind of pay attention to the vocabulary, because we're talking about thinking about a neighborhood in terms of an ecosystem. And we're saying that these landmarks are really key. The landmark that you knew, whether it's a small business or a church that's a kind of substantial building, your orientation is disrupted to the place that you knew. Disinvestment is a huge outcome, and it's one that has a extended legacy. And then the community fabric is not connected. And so these are things to be aware of. Okay, I'm going to make that a little shorter, but what Full of Love also provides us is, so this idea of root shock is a way to understand what has happened. And then she gives us this other great one, the aesthetics of equity, because now what do we do? And if some of you have been in West Montgomery and you see what it feels like today, and it does feel somewhat disconnected, and we do have houses boarded up, and we can't find the businesses that used to be there. But how do we get to an aesthetic of equity, which is the planning part and the design part, and the one I hope you'll hold on to, because it might play out no matter what field you're in. But one is we have to ensure freedom of movement. Everybody should have the right to move through the city with access to where they want to go. And that is about public transportation, but it's also about civic infrastructure. That's about sidewalks. That's about bike lanes. That's about being able to get where you want to go with the ease that everybody else has in the other neighborhoods that did not have to suffer this. Another great one is treasure your buildings. So for those of you in historic preservation or archaeology, those remaining landmarks are treasures, and especially ones that were touchstones. In West Montgomery, we have Holt Street Baptist Church, we have AME Zion, Mount Zion Church, we have a little historic Art Deco service station. We have a handful of buildings, and those become very important to treasure and to use as touchstones. Okay? Respect the common way of life as you would an individual life. And that's just a reminder that things like parks, things like these neighborhoods need ways for people to enjoy just the daily basic things like walking to the corner store, and just remember that as a kind of guide when you're starting to replan to rebuild a community. And then this one is a big one, and from a government side, break the cycle of disinvestment. So now I'm showing you a map of this same neighborhood and an image looking down Mobile Street. You all remember the diagonal, Mobile Street. This is really what we'd call inner city. Was that neighborhood I showed you, that dense, beautiful little neighborhood of houses and shops and the furniture factory. This is what it looks like today. And if you can kind of see, can you guys see that light outline of shapes? A lot of these parcels are in a light outline. All of those are vacant, and all of those are now city-owned. So what happens when that freeway is built is that the impact, the destruction of living beside it, a lot of buildings close up, boarded up, people have moved, buildings come down. They weren't necessarily designed for, they're not all brick. A lot of them are wood. We have lost a lot of buildings, and now we're looking at a landscape that looks like this, okay? And that's that. And that I would say is, this is our challenge. This is the inheritance of that planning decision. And this is what I'm working on, and I'm not keeping good time, but I think that the rest of this, I'm going to show you how do we go forward and what do we do. So this is sort of I hope for especially our students, an invitation and inspiration to pursue some of these fields, because we can do things and we can do new things, and the new things we can do together are exciting. Okay, so I started making different maps and grouping different parcels and looking at different opportunities, and we started writing out some goals. New development here needs to benefit the local community and economy. It needs to create jobs. It needs to deal with some of these stipulations to benefit low to moderate income people. We're not trying to achieve a gentrification fulfillment of this dream. We are trying to honor the neighborhood and the people who are here and work together in some new ways. We're going to incorporate good design principles, walkability, these things we talked about, landmarks, connectivity. And then we were going to try to move this forward. So now we're into some experimental ways of doing this. And this is where we start making drawings, we start dreaming, we start reaching out to new partners. And you all are the future of this succeeding, because this is about what can we dream going forward. That is a drawing I made at one point when we were looking at the possibility of recruiting the Booker T. Washington School after the fire. That's just a drawing, but that's like, well, what could we do here? We have the lands. The land is good. The people are good. And then this is a public art piece that was made by Kevin King, who runs the King's Canvas, which is a nonprofit in the neighborhood that does public art with young people. And this is actually installed now. And this beautiful image is totally original idea, referencing George Washington Carver and his history of working with black belt farmers, and the Sankofa, which is a West African symbol that reminds us to go back and find what we know. Go back. And so I'm learning along with the folks that are making these images. But we have then also done, so next level of a plan. Well, how do we build inside this space? Who do we recruit? We reached out to Tuskegee University, to their College of Agriculture, to their Carver Center for Integrative Sustainability. And we have now brought them as partners to that former furniture site to open their first Urban Agriculture Innovation Center. You are all invited to be a part of this effort. They are not interested in just being a siloed university doing things by themselves. They come with a spirit of collaboration, and they spent 2 years running a public dialogue series. Those of you that do oral history work or things like this, or interested in agriculture, urban agriculture, these are really good folks trying hard in an area that has all the challenges we described. So that's a drawing that they made to look at their campus. That's another drawing I made for them to kind of help visualize. We started with just banners along the chain link fence to let people know something is coming. You know, like something new. What is it? And this is what another thing I'm going to try to share with you as we wrap up, or as we do not need to wait for the giant plans. We do not need to wait for the federal government to come and fix it all. We do not really need to wait for the big grants even. We need to start where we are, and we need to start today, and we need to start together, and we need to start with joy. And so this is kind of our starting point. We just made these drawings as Tuskegee University at the level of the president and all that started bringing together a program for the Urban Agriculture Innovation Center. And there's the power team. That's my boss Desmond in the middle with all of them. And that is an image they made of what that would look like. This is the first day that they now have several shipping containers. They have a solar-powered office. They dug their own well. They want to be sustainable and on their own terms. And we have worked with them to create original new agreements. And then this, you guys, this is for real. This is just like 2 weeks ago. This thing called the Freight Farms is landing. It's a hydroponic unit. It's they use it currently, Ravello, that restaurant, you know, some of the fancy restaurants, Vintage, they have one of these freight farms, and they grow year-round basils and greens. And so the Urban Agriculture Innovation Center will not be able to teach not only sort of raised bed methods so people can learn how to do it in their home, but they can come and get trained. They can be a part of a new business. So now we're starting to achieve some of this really kind of higher order reinvestment type of work. Oh, I share you this drawing because we're going to be working on infill affordable smart green housing. We're doing that by reaching out to partners and proposing new solutions. That's just a drawing I made, but and I share that for those of you who do like to draw or who do like to visualize futures that don't exist. That's not necessarily what it's going to look like or anything, but by starting to change the conversation about what we can do, we're getting towards this type of thing: economic community development, public-private partnerships. There's a lot of buzz about the smart city, and I would argue a smart city is a just city. So how do we use this technology, all these smart technologies, to accomplish equity and justice? A list of all the goodies. And what are we aiming for when we do this now? We know what we're struggling against, but what are we aiming for? And that's the part I like to use the term community health equity. Every community has the right and should have equal access to all of the things that help us live in healthy, happy ways. And so one of the things on this curious list that is a reminder to you is, how do you get towards that? And when you see this neighborhood and it feels boarded up, or you see this place and it feels stuck, start to disrupt what you think is, like, move beyond that. And you become an agent by moving through it in new ways, bringing groups of friends there, having an evening barbecue, taking over the street, roller skating, I don't know. But it's encouraging I'm trying to encourage us that we have to get there by doing a range of different tactics. Some of them these long, serious plans, and some of them a little more loose and open. And I say that professionally. I encourage you. This is a term. Have you all heard this term, creative placemaking? No, really? Okay. Well, it is what it sounds like, and it's actually like there's this whole body of scholarship around creative placemaking. But creative placemaking means that if we're going to transform the built environment, you go out into the city and you're like, this is difficult or boring, or this is stuck. How do we change it? Well, we change it together, and we work especially with an arts kind of community perspective. And we do that by through events, through collaborations, grants, funding different types of things. And so this is actually an official definition. Creative placemaking is when artists, arts organizations, community development practitioners deliberately integrate arts and culture into community revitalization, placing arts at the table with land use, transportation, economic development, education, housing, arts. That's what we're underscoring here. And you don't have to be a good hand-drawing artist to understand music, how important the arts are to revitalization. And so this is an actual national, international approach. And this is our little mobile studio right there. In 2015 or so, doing this thing, we set up a pop-up studio. We did some drawings by day. We projected the drawings on the empty building at night. And guess what? People saw it and thought, oh, is this little node coming back? Could this be something? And it really does help change people's perspectives. These are drawings, this visualization, this stirring up of what could be through the arts is what this stuff is about. And this is just a little bit of a follow-up slide to talk about how important those little neighborhood nodes are, the little neighborhood business districts, because we all should be able to walk to get a cup of coffee or a juice in the morning and a newspaper, and those nodes can come back to life. So that's a lot of stuff. And then I share this drawing just to say we can then implement these ideas systemically too. And that means we can look at all of our neighborhood nodes. We can look at all of our boarded up business districts. We can start to map them, and we can start to use these strategies. And that's a map I made to kind of map all of the ones that, as we learn about them in the city, and then we can start to promote things with new programs like maybe facade grants or placemaking grants or this kind of thing. So we can work together to also systemically isn't a bad word. It just means we have an approach that's coordinated, and if we work together for equitable community health goals, we can get there. I'm almost done. This was a Auburn University Historic Preservation studio, so this is another way scholars, young people can get involved. This one actually was up in Centennial Hill, doing kind of community-based research. Collaboration is really key. And like we've talked about, digging into our historic landmarks, our important buildings, doing this work of oral history collection, all of this is part of informing the next thing. This is just another effort that was a kind of collaboration between students and city leaders and faculty and so on. And then again, for the more rigorous, especially those of you on the health and science side of things, we can measure community health equity. And so I have a couple slides just to let you know that if you are interested in this side of things, and there's a way to measure and account for, are we accomplishing what we're setting out to account for? I'm showing you this crazy slide because when I first started trying to measure community health equity, and you look to the government, they had these very cumbersome systems, computer programs. They were very hard to navigate, and we could barely figure them out, and had something called the HCAT and all this. But it keeps getting stronger as the publication of this book kind of helps demonstrate the scholarship, the rigor is stronger. So now there's this amazing thing, the Community Opportunity Map. It's a free tool for all of you. It was created by the Casey Family Programs, and it will help you map. Say you want to know, like, what is my neighborhood? How do I fit in? It will show you so many different indicators of community health. So vacant housing, housing cost burden, single mother families. It will give you sort of the data behind the thing, and then you can use those redlining maps. You can use different tools to build a case for or understanding of what you're striving for. And then this is a slide just to talk about, again, where does this all fit in? Because some of you might be more interested in individual health, and some of you might be more interested in community partnerships, and some of you might be in that interest of community capacity building. And all of these things, have a sort of, there's a policy component, there's a hands on the ground touching people's lives, and it's kind of just to show that we work together in these various professions to achieve this type of goal. Design. This is to let you know that we are working towards the 60th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. That's where we are today. We covered, many years in this talk, and we're headed towards this incredible anniversary, and we are using these principles of recognition, reconciliation, reparation, and regeneration to guide the reinvestment in West Montgomery, to bring together a series of activities and programs and new approaches to urban planning and design. And so in summary, we have got to tell the truth. We have got to tell the truth because people's lives have been impacted, and they have been impacted intentionally by our government. If we're going to do the work, I made these drawings because there are ways for me to process what this means. But then, once we are honest with each other and with our government systems, we can go forward together with intentionality towards reparation, regeneration, and this recreation of the aesthetics of equity. So this is kind of looking at that, some of the remaining landmarks. I've used this map to go after some big grants. There's a lot of federal funding right now through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and especially for communities that qualify as what's called Justice 40, which means 40% of this funding is going to honestly repair this damage done. So politics aside, that's just happening, and cities like Montgomery are really trying to go after very large grants to do this work. So you guys, please get involved. Lastly, this is up at City of St. Jude. We're working on a little city-owned corner there, which is the gateway to the march. This is underway if any of you are interested. Again, I know that some of your faculty are doing oral history collections up at the City of St. Jude. There's lots of different things, ways to get involved. And just to give you a sense that this is not planners that applying this work top down, but this is collaborative work that happens together sort of from the ground up. And lastly, just a couple images of what reinvesting in the trail is going to look like. It's not a small job. It will require a commensurate amount of investment and action as it did to build those freeways in the first place. meaning we've got to really put a lot of money, effort, planning, and effort behind this. And this is my last slide to show you what that trail could look like coming through Oak Street. You're seeing the King's Canvas on the left, who has meanwhile been building murals and doing creative placemaking, music, roller skating, all these things, and that is all of us in the street painting the intersection together, and that just happened this last year. So thank you all so much for the chance to share this with you. I really do hope you'll reach out, and through your faculty or as faculty with the city, we have a great partnership with AUM, and we're just delighted to keep going together.
We're going to give Jocelyn just a few minutes break to catch her to get a drink, but I would love for you at your tables. There's a lot to think about here. I'd love for you at your tables to talk about something that you would like to learn about more, something that makes you curious, something that challenged you, something that connects with rights or justice, or something that really connects to your own civic identity and commitment. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes at your tables to chat, and then we'll move on to a more open conversation.
2-minute warning. Try to wrap up those conversations. All right. We're going to invite Jocelyn back to the front to answer some questions. We've got about 10 minutes, and I would like to open the floor for conversation from questions from students and or faculty. I'm doing a thing that's wrong, which is I'm talking while other people are talking. So I'm going to wait for just a minute for everyone to give me their attention. Dr. Bazayat told me I need to do that more. So, so let me open the floor for questions. We've got about 10 to 12 minutes for questions, for Q&A. So who wants to speak or who wants to ask the first question? I'll bring the microphone so that we can make sure it's recorded and we can catch the question and the response. So who would like to ask the first question?
Firstly, I loved what I heard of your presentation, but as a student, what is it that I can do to further the initiative?
Even with the microphone, you're so soft-spoken.
I said I loved what I saw of your presentation. As a student, what can I do to help further the initiative?
What are you studying?
Interdisciplinary studies with a business economics concentration.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So I'll repeat the question. Just what I heard is, what as a student can we do or can you do to advance these initiatives? And you are studying the interdisciplinary studies and a business and econ kind of approach. So, but I'll see if I can answer in some ways for multiple disciplines, because I think that's what's so cool about this initiative of civil rights, civic virtues. And I think that's the premise of this, if I understand it right, both the engagement side and the virtue side, that what can you do? You know, and so from that premise, well, one is really, I hope I'll just kind of draw on the things I was sharing. I think knowing our history is really important, and taking ownership of your disciplinary history, whether it's science, whether it's design, whether it's planning. You know, we need to understand our own profession, like the profession, economics. What is the history of how we've gotten to the capitalist system we operate within today, and then and what is our, sort of a disciplinary history. Where are we in the world? What do our landscapes look like? And then finding the thing that touches your heart, I think, about what you want to do in the world, the thing you're here to do, and the talents you're drawing on, and the things you're learning in school, and then finding ways to be involved. And I don't think there's sort of a final answer. It's always a learning process. And again, it's what I think so exciting about this initiative is it's a chance to learn from a bunch of different people around the country and visit some of these important new places in our capital, because they are new and they are exceptional, and they open up doors to worlds of work, whether it's legal work or educational work or even design work. You'll start to get kind of glimpses of the things I hope that will excite you, and like I want to get in there. I'll say with economics that this topic I mentioned of disinvestment is very, very challenging to overcome. Very challenging to overcome, because when people do this thing of development and business and investment, they want this thing called ROI. And they want that. That's what they want. And that is return on investment. And I'm a kind of artist person, as you can see, and it's like, but that's why people put money into things, because they want money back. And even if they're philanthropic, there's a bottom line issue here. So that means we have to be creative, because we cannot condemn these places to the decisions of the past, but we have to find new ways to make that investment valuable. And it can be valuable in terms, the return on investment can be a monetary thing, and it can be a community thing, and it can be an earth thing. So what are we investing in? The regeneration of the health of our environments, in the well-being of our communities, and this wonderful thing, the economic lifeblood that allows all of us to get up, go to work, and take care of our families. And so we need you, because you will bring new imagination and new vision to what does it mean to transform these places, whether it's from a business perspective or a developer perspective. They're not done, but they are in a transformative space. So I hope that helps. I think you're on your path. This is a great forum for sharing and learning.
Hello, my name is Ognitra Roy Chaudhary with the Economics Department.
Oh, cool.
First of all, I would like to thank you for this wonderful presentation. It was really informative. My question is the interaction of zoning laws and how that interplays with some of these infrastructure developments, because my understanding is that the wealthier areas they're wealthier, and they tend to have different zoning restrictions in place, and then you have different zoning restrictions in some other suburban or even urban areas. So I was wondering if there is any initiatives around changing or reforming the zoning so that it is actually going to be a little bit more equitable, or like, is something going on there, or is something that we can do about that?
Oh, it's a great question and a great opportunity to put more of my official city hat on and let you all know that we did recently complete a new 2040 comprehensive plan for the city of Montgomery. Please go online and look at it. It took 2 years to produce. The website has all of the background demographics, all of the white papers on economic development, on environment, on everything. It's a great repository. It's just called Envision 2040, or not just, that's where it is. And you can find the full plan there. That's a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is a very broad plan. It's not down to every detail of every street. It is a guiding plan for a city. The last time a comprehensive plan was made for the city of Montgomery was 1965. This is it was just outrageous to learn that for me as a person who does planning work. But so there's that resource, and that was drafted after, I think, 20 plus community meetings. It was very well informed. If any of you attended any of those meetings, I was really impressed with the turnout and the citizen involvement, stakeholder involvement. So that plan is a resource. That plan called for a new land use code for the city. So this is to speak to zoning. We are currently writing a new land use code for the whole city. But the city does have this thing called smart code. We were just had a quick side question about sort of new urbanism. Smart code is a way to streamline some of the zoning and regulatory requirements. It sort of gives you some blanket guidelines, and it also allows for more mixed-use development. So historically, a lot of the zoning was very kind of segregated by type. Even not talking about racial segregation. Historic zoning was industrial goes here, business goes here, residential goes here. It in some ways protected people from living too close to some difficult environmental impacts of, say, industry. But what we've learned is that mixed use and more flexible zoning makes for better neighborhoods, because you might want your office above your apartment or your apartment above your office, or you might want a shop and a office, you know. So we're moving towards a new land use code, and it is inclusive of a number of principles that will make for better community health equity. So there is more of that flexibility with mixed use. There's more protection of our environmental streams, wetlands, kind of our green infrastructure, our living infrastructure, and protection of the environment, and there's more flexibility coming. So, but thank you for that, because, and I'll say one last thing, which I didn't get to, data. I heard this at the USGBC a bunch of years ago, Green Build. Data is our new natural resource. Data is for everybody, and it is part of equity is that the data is transparent. So one thing City of Montgomery has been doing in this Smart City initiative is making more of its data, more of its decision-making transparent and publicly accessible. So I can't believe I'm plugging a website for the city, but go check out the website and you will dig into it, and you will find that a lot of this is there for you. There are some civil rights history neighborhood documents that are new that we've been doing to uplift the importance of those West Side, Centennial Hill, and Claudette Colvin's neighborhood. So there are some great new planning tools. Thanks. Yeah.
This will be our last question.
Okay.
Because of time.
Sorry, guys. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nick Cuba from Biology and Environmental Science.
Hi, Nick.
So you talked about the events in the 60s
Yes.
and then projecting forward to the 2040. I wanted to ask, as it pertains to the process of planning, but also the idea of community space, community participation and involvement, have you accounted for certain dimensions of climate change, particularly maybe extreme summer heat and increased incidence of tornadoes in the area?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, in my whole background, my professional training really is as a landscape architect. And that really means we're, landscape architects, like architects, are licensed professionals that are beholden to the health, safety, welfare of the built environment. But for landscape architects, that really means the living planet, not just the built world. So I appreciate the question, because I feel very good about closing on this topic. This is really fundamental to everything we do is sustainability and resilience and truth-telling about climate change. So when it comes to community health equity, one of the impacts that is being exacerbated by climate change is what we call the heat island effect. So neighborhoods that do not have shaded trees, neighborhoods that have more asphalt, more open spaces, their temperatures are much higher than neighborhoods with nice shaded trees and good sidewalk, all that. So that means that people in those neighborhoods, especially seniors, are vulnerable to what we're going to see increasing temperatures. But there's other things, storms and so on. And so I will say this, that we think about this a lot, and when it comes to some of these infrastructure grants or some of these grants for rebuilding West Side, one of the layers that we're building into that are, say, microgrids, so that we can have renewable energy powered centers. So if we do have a storm, places like the historic Loveless School might be a place for community health and safety. So there's so much in what you're asking, but I do feel really grateful for the opportunity to close my part by reminding us all that we are beings of this planet and of the earth, and we have to reconnect, really, all of us together to the living systems that sustain us, and look truthfully in the face of our human impact and design these neighborhoods so that they are sustainable, resourceful. That word regenerative to me is a kind of touchstone, because it means we say, even Shady Street that we've been building together, we are building back biodiversity. We are building back floodwater capacity storage. We're building back, as we tell the history of the neighborhood, we're remembering some of the things like people used to have gardens and grow fruit trees. So yeah, it's really, really key. And there's an RFP out there right now from the city looking at a new climate resilience plan. So we did our 2040 plan, we're doing a land use plan, and there will be next a climate action and resilience plan for the city. Thanks.
please join me in thanking Jocelyn one last time.
Yay, thank you guys.
Hopefully, later today, those of you who attended today will receive an email from me with a survey link. But if you want to get in front of that before I send you the email, there is a QR code you can scan at the on the back of your program. Please provide us feedback so that we can continue to offer these sorts of programs in the future. Thank you so much.